Welcome to Christmas at Bear's Paw Ranch. I'm Eleanor Burns. Today you'll learn everything about machine quilting from A to Z. Now that includes B for binding, C for cleaning, F for free motion, right up to S for stippling, stitch in the ditch, and stencils. Learn to become a pro at machine quilting. Join me. Do you have a whole stack of quilt tops just waiting to be quilted? Well, you know, a quilt is not finished until it's quilted. We have some great information for you today. Welcome my good friend, Sandy Thompson. Now, Sandy is a quilt teacher and a machine quilter, long arm quilter. How long have you been quilting, Sandy?
I've been using my long arm for 4.5 years now, but I did work on my home machine for quite a few years before that. I believe it's important to learn on your home machine.
It just adds that finished dimension. Oh gosh, Sandy, and I'll tell you, I appreciate you so much because when I'm done with my top, I'm done. And then we just mail it off to Sandy and she sends it back. Beautiful.
Thank you.
So where do we start?
Okay. What I try to explain to my students is there's some prep work to do for your top before you machine quilt it. First of all, you want your borders to fit your quilt. So what we do is we take the inside part of the quilt and measure it with a tape measure 3 times, okay? Then you take that average and make your border that size, plus 1 inch for each end.
So if this were like 43 and
42, you would do 42 and a half.
Okay.
The average, plus 1 inch, plus 1 inch.
Good.
Lay your border on, and what I do is I flip it up this way, and then I would overhang 1 inch on each end, and then pin it in place. And when I sew my borders on, I sew them underneath so that I can see which way the seams are going, and they lay flat as you go. After that, you take and press these out, and you would then trim off this end flush with the quilt. Did you want me to do that?
Sure.
Okay,
I think squaring off the ends is just as important as getting them to fit the top.
Right, you want to make sure this lines up even with your quilt top. Make sure your horizontal line here is on the border.
Important.
And that makes it real straight. And then you would take and just trim this little piece right away. Did you want me to throw it over my shoulder? Then what you would do is you would take the 2 sides and measure again 3 more times. Take the average, cut the next 2 borders, pin them on, press them out, and trim the ends off. Okay?
Great.
Then after your borders are on, what I do is I take my top and I check the back for all the seams, and I want them to lay flat. If, for instance, this seam was flipped, when you go to stitch in the ditch, your ditch changes across this block, and you want all these to lay flat. Therefore, stitching the ditch through all the squares is a stitch.
So if it lays flat, then you know that your seams are.
Some people don't know.
Flat.
Right. Some people don't know what the ditch is.
Yes.
The ditch is the part that is only a single layer. I call this the ridge.
Oh,
where the 3 layers are. When the stitch sits on the ridge, it shows. When it goes into the ditch, it goes down inside the batting, and then all you see is the nice stitching.
And we'll show that when we machine quilt the basket quilt. Okay. And next we have the batting.
Okay, once your top is prepared properly, you need to think what kind of batting you want to use. I have a couple samples here of polyester. They come in different lofts. Polyester is a synthetic. It is very soft and very warm. It doesn't breathe, so it is warmer. Then we have cotton, which is a natural fiber. It breathes. It's
much better for California.
Much better for California. It is denser, though. It's not fluffy like the polyester. And then there are cottons that have what's called a scrim, and it's a little layer of pellon that is stuck to the cotton. And what it does is it gives the cotton some strength so it doesn't pull apart. If you have a scrim on your cotton, you can quilt it further apart. Then if you're not sure what you want, there's always the blend, and this is just a piece of polyester and cotton blend. And it's kind of nice to have a little bit of both.
Perfect.
So those are my samples.
And what's your favorite? Which one do you like?
I change. Well, I love the polyester. It's so snuggly and warm, and I like to make flannel quilts, and it's just so nice and snug.
You see a lot of dimension.
Yes, you do, and I like to see my quilting, so you can see it a lot more in the polyester.
Okay, now we're on to our backing. Now this one is interesting. No plain muslin here, Sandy.
No plain muslin. I like to have a color backing that works well with the top.
Yes.
And it's just, you put all this energy into making the top, you might as well have a pretty back for it.
Absolutely.
Now you notice the stitching?
Yes.
The thing is here that you're going to see, if you're going to use tan thread on the front, you're going to see tan thread on the back. It's important to have the same color thread on the back because it helps with the tension. If you don't, what we call pokies happen. And you, say for instance, if I had a red thread here and a white thread here, red little pokies come up.
Yes, and nothing worse than pokies in your quilt.
So what we do is we try to use the same thread on the top and the bottom. So if you have a neutral color for the back, then your threads aren't going to show as much.
Now see, I really prefer matching the thread to the fabric. It's really great. Now this is cotton. What if you would like to use some flannel, like this one?
Flannel is wonderful for backs of quilts. The only thing you need to remember with the flannel is that you do need to pre-wash and shrink it. It is a different texture, and it does bleed and it does ravel. So I do pre-wash one time.
The flannel.
For the flannel for the back.
Now
Correct.
there's cotton on the top.
Right.
And flannel on the back.
Yes, and that's a beautiful stippling. It's called stippling, that stitch.
Amy did this one.
It's
She
very
does
nice.
like big old jigsaw stitches. It's just so pretty. Well, we showed you the top, the batting, the backing. Now we're on to some machine quilting. We have everything ready that you want to know about layering and machine quilting with the walking foot. So let's see your top, Sandy.
Okay, we have this top here, and I wanted to show you how to layer it. The first thing you need to do is take your backing material and lay it flat on a surface. Table works well. It's a little hard to work off the floor.
That's true.
What I do if I don't have the clamps, these clamps are nice for edges of tables that they fit on. If they don't fit on those, then I just use some masking tape, and I lay the masking tape on and snug up the back. Then I put the batting on top of the backing and put the top and inset it at least 2 inches. Now I do one more step. I take the masking tape and I masking tape the top to the table also, all the way across, and this makes it nice and secure for the pinning.
And you know, I do the exact same step with my clamps.
Yes. If you have an edge of a table, it works
Yes,
really
you need a
well.
little narrow edge.
Okay, then you want to safety pin baste your quilt at least 3 inches apart. And this is a safety pin with a little hat on it.
A little pin cover.
And
dressed up for pinning.
This is a handy tool that helps you pick up and close the safety pin.
Little pin tool.
And
tool.
Pick it up and close it, and this quilt is pinned and ready to be quilted. I do recommend pinning in the areas that you're not going to be quilting. Makes it a little easier than moving the pins as you go.
You're right.
Okay, then we're ready. If this is ready, then we're ready to check our machine and make sure it's clean. What I do is I take the foot off, and I have a couple tools that I use. I use a little brush and some tweezers. I also use some cotton swabs. These are amazing how much stuff you can get out of the inside of your machine.
I'm afraid for you to open that, Sandy.
Take the cover off the bobbin and take your bobbin out.
This is going to be scary.
And let's just try one of these little cotton swabs and see. Okay, well,
I planted those just for you.
oh good. I do this every time I start a quilt because it really helps the thread to maneuver, you know, smoothly through your machine.
So you don't like the canned air?
No, the canned air pushes all your lint down inside your machine. You want to pull the lint out of the machine. So whatever
That
you
makes
can do.
sense.
And of course you need to go get your service periodically. So
Yes.
yeah, let's get our bobbin back in.
And what kind of thread do you have on there?
This is a cotton thread that I'm using today. I like cotton thread because it's a little thicker than a polyester, for instance. I like to see my stitches, so I really like using a cotton thread. There are other threads, polyesters, there's poly-wrapped cottons, and they're all usable. It's fun to use variegated also.
Oh, I know.
The variegateds are really nice. Okay, what you need, the next tool that you need is what's called a walking foot. And this is a tool that has what's called feed dogs on the top. And they're little ridges that help pull all the bulk in the batting through. This bar here is what makes the little feed dogs walk. See that? This bar goes over the needle pin here, the needle bar. And you have to get that up on top, take it around from behind. Can you roll that up? The needle
I will. We'll do this together
Oh,
here.
thank you.
Because I have your screw.
Oh,
there
then you
go.
need to put your screw in and finger tighten it. Of course, this is...
It's hard to do.
Yeah,
it's
if you go from the back, just
like
remember to
patting
go in
your
from
head,
the back.
rubbing your tummy.
Thank you. Then
all
I
those
always
little things.
use the screwdriver to tighten it. And you do want to tighten it tight because you don't want it falling off.
And that always happens right in the middle of your line of quilting.
Now, I do like to use a 90 machine needle, a sharp or a Microtech sharp or a machine quilting needle. The 90 is a little stronger, and when you're dealing with the bulk and sometimes 5 layers of fabric, it tends to go right through real nice.
Good.
Okay, the next step I do is I make a little sandwich with the backing, the batting, and a piece of the fabric from the top, and this is where I test my stitch, my tension, and make sure everything's running smoothly before I start on the quilt. I want to teach you how to pull the bobbin thread up. What you want to do is you want to take your wheel and roll it forward one full rotation till the hook gets back to the top. Then you pull this out and pull the top thread, and voila, there's the bobbin thread.
Ta-da!
And what you want to do now is just put your needle in and put your foot down, and you're ready to sew. Hold on to your threads. The whole idea is to not get a little ball on the back. Take a couple stitches forward, couple stitches back, and then you can release that and you're ready to roll. I do about 3.0 on my stitch length. And the reason is because you're not piecing anymore. Now you're adding the backing and the batting, and you can crank it up a little bit. Believe me, it makes it a lot faster too.
So it's the same thread in the bobbin as in the top.
Yes, it is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the back, and I'm going to say, well, it's really a nice stitch. I like the length, and there's no problems with the top poking through, the bottom poking through. So everything's ready to go.
Now, what if you used monofilament thread like this?
Monofilament is forgiving when you're learning how to machine quilt.
Yes, I like that.
You don't see your mistakes, which is nice. The thing with the monofilament is that it is a different texture and made. Some of them are nylon, some of them are, I'm not sure exactly what they are. But you need to adjust your tension a little bit because of the stitch. So
drop your tension.
Drop your tension a little bit with the monofilaments.
Yes. Okay. I usually sew at 4. When I use the monofilament, I go down to 1.5. That much.
That's a lot.
That's a lot.
It is a lot, but it really helps out a lot. We're going to pull this quilt over and get you started. Now I always start in the middle. And you don't really need to roll your quilt up. If you just pleat it, it works just fine, like this.
Okay.
And when they say start in the middle, they don't mean dead center. We mean the middle seam. So we're going to put this under the foot. And
perfect.
We're going to stitch in the ditch. I can get my bobbin thread up here. Now, setting yourself up, you want to make sure you have some table space around you.
And this is a great table.
Oh, it's an excellent table.
Flat.
It's
from the
flat, and you have some working space. Now, this bulk will drag. So what you want to do is lift it up and get it up on your chest. And you hold your thread and take your stitches forward. And remember, I showed you what the ditch was. So every time there's a seam, your ditch could change. So you need to feel with your finger as you're sewing and make sure you're staying in the ditch.
So your body is right behind the needle.
Right. And if
They're
you
all
have
lined
needle
up.
down, go ahead and put that
Use
down.
that.
That helps a lot. And you just work your way across the quilt.
Now I'm
Okay?
going to help you out, Sandy, with some light.
I forgot about the light.
Yes, you've got to have the light, not in the front of you, but on this side of you,
Right.
so you can really get it
Oh,
in
that
there.
helps so much.
Didn't that help?
That's a good suggestion there.
I know, especially whenever you're doing that night quilting, it works out great.
Oh, yes.
And so now, Sandy, are you going to go straight down the lattice?
I'm going to go all the way down this lattice to the other end, and then I'm going to back tack, and I'm going to cut my thread, and I'm going to go back up to this end of the lattice and go the same direction. And the reason I go the same direction is if you turn and go the other way, you tend to get this kind of a tweak in it. And if you keep going the same directions on your lattices, they lay flatter.
We do not want tweaking
We don't.
in our quilt. Well, Sandy's going to stabilize the quilt, and then we'll show you how to free motion those side triangles. Sandy stabilized the quilt through the lattice, and now she's ready to trace the stencils and show you some free motion machine quilting.
This is a stencil, and what we've done is pre-marked the corner and the side of the quilt with the blue water washable pen. It's one of my favorite marking tools because first of all, you can pre-mark your quilt. You don't have to mark it after it's pinned, and you can spritz it out with water or a wet sponge, or you can wash it out with cold water when you're finished.
That's the amazing part.
It just disappears. We just really like this one. I have other tools that I like for marking. I like a chalk pencil. It's good for dark black fabrics or dark fabrics. I also have a little chalk with a little wheel on the top here. This is yellow. It comes in blue and white also.
Big
For
green
other
on
colors.
black.
Right. Regular old chalkboard chalk works really well. A lot of people don't know about this. You can put it in a pencil sharpener.
You can?
Yeah, it works really good.
Oh my gosh.
And it's really inexpensive.
Well, that's true.
I also use masking tape. I like masking tape for marking for straight lines. You don't have to mark all your straight lines. You just put some tape down and sew next to the line and then move the tape. It works out really good. So I have this pounce that has chalk inside of it.
Now that's my favorite
And
one.
Elle's going to show us how it works here.
I get to do it.
You just take your pounce and you wipe it across the stencil.
Okay.
The only problem with using the chalk products is they do tend to bounce off while you're quilting. So you have to mark, quilt it, mark, and quilt it.
See how good it
Whereas
looks.
with the blue pen, it'll stay on there. That looks really nice.
See, Sandy, because it's called a pounce, I thought that you're supposed to go like this, and I get chalk everywhere. Now I learned something.
No, it works good, but it just bounces off when you sew on it. So I do use it as I go. That's the trick of the trade with that one. Okay, now that we're all pre-marked here, we're ready to set the sewing machine up. What you need to do first is drop your feed dogs, and I'll reach under here. And a lot of machines have a little button in the back that you just push one way or the other, and it drops the feed dogs. Some of the older machines have what's called a throat plate cover. This is off my 1952 Black Singer.
That's an oldie.
It's a very oldie, but it shows what it does is it snaps over. The feed dogs are still working underneath, and what it does is it gives you the free surface, the loose surface, so you can do your drawing with your thread.
And I've also heard that people just tape a business card across.
Some people have featherweight sewing machines, and that's the best way to do it. Is you just take a business card and put a little hole in it, and put some tape on it, and it covers the feed dogs up. So that's very usable, especially if you like to machine quilt on your featherweight. This is called a darning foot, and we're going to put that on next. What the darning foot does is it has a spring that holds the fabric in place while the needle is taking a stitch. Then the little bar gets pulled up by the needle bar, which hooks over it. So I'll show you how to put it on. You come in from behind like the walking foot. Make sure that the little bar is over the needle bar, and then you just screw it on.
Perfect.
With the feed dogs down and the darning foot in place, we're ready to quilt. Do use your screwdriver again. We don't want that falling off.
Breaks a needle when it falls off.
Okay, I'm going to move my stencil.
Okay.
So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to come up here to the 3 holly leaves and get started. Just kind of get some tension off the quilt here.
Now, is that a continuous line?
Not really, but you can make a continuous line. What I'm going to do is go around the berry, a berry, and then go up and do the leaf, and then I'm going to jump over to the other berries, okay? So I'm going to start at the bottom of the leaf, and I'm going to pull the bobbin thread up, just like we did with the darning foot, and pull it till the hook gets back to the top, pull it out of the way, and there's my bottom bobbin. And the reason is, when you start sewing, you'll make a nice little gopher guts on the back.
That's a good thing to remember.
Now, while you're sewing, what you're going to do is you're going to start by locking a back tack. You don't hit reverse. You have no, oops, I got to put the, if you have the needle down, use the needle down. Now I can let go of the thread because it's locked. What I did is I just moved my hands a little forward, a little back, and it did a reverse. Now I'm going to go around the berry. And what I like to do is kind of roll this side up and kind of make a handle out of it. Gives me something to hold on to. And I use my other hand to kind of position it and move it around also. The thing is, you don't want to steer this like a steering wheel. You want to learn how to keep the quilt flat. When we're on the berry, now I'm going to come up and go around the holly leaf.
And keep the top at the top.
Oops.
You're doing great.
Now, if you want to stop and take a break, you don't do it like I just did on the curve. I got a tweak there. The best way to do it is at the peaks, at the points. Okay, now I breathe.
Breathe.
Now, something to remember. We need to sit comfortably in front of the needle. Relax your shoulders. And if you can sit up a little higher, that helps also. Again, people always say, well, how do you get all your stitches so even? It takes practice. Practice, practice, practice. I've been told it takes about 25 hours of practice.
You know, Sandy, you are doing such a good job on this. I think you should take this quilt home and finish it for me. Well, thank you for coming.
Thank you so much.
Since I couldn't convince Sandy to take this quilt home and finish it, I'm going to show you how to do the binding. Well, first of all, I took 5 3-inch strips and sewed them together into one big long strip. Then I took and I pressed that strip in half, wrong sides together. So now I'm ready. I'm going to start in the middle of one side and line up the raw edge of the binding with the raw edge of the quilt. I still have the 2 inches of backing and batting sticking out there, and I don't like to trim that away until my binding is on. So I'm just going to go ahead and line this edge up right here. I can raise my walking foot and slip the quilt under. Okay, drop my walking foot, and I am ready. Now my seam is about 3/8 of an inch. It's actually the width of the walking foot, so it's a little bit wider than the 1/4 inch foot. I'm using an open toe walking foot so I can really see what I'm doing here. I set my stitch length at 3.5, and it's a nice long stitch, and I actually moved my needle over just a little bit. It's at 4.5. So it's not quite centered on the walking foot. Okay, I'm coming into the corner right here, and I want to make sure you see this. I'm going to take a pin and put that pin at the same width of the walking foot, about 3/8 of an inch. That's my stopping point. So I want to just get right up to that pin. I'm going to stop with my needle in, needle down, and then sew at a diagonal into the corner. Then just take this corner, turn it, and sew right off to the corner. So it's a little bit of a diagonal stitching. And let me show you how that looks right there. Diagonal stitching. Now I want to take the binding, take out the pin, fold it straight up at an angle so that it just lines up with the edge on the quilt. And once it's folded straight up, you can kind of crease that. Then take this whole big old strip and fold it back down on the diagonal again. And I'm just going to start stitching where I left off. Turn to the second side and start stitching, and that's my miter. And hopefully I have a nice crisp miter underneath my binding. Okay, and just keep on going. And you repeat that step at every corner that you do. Now I want to show you how you trim it out. You just take your scissors and You could also do it with your rotary cutter. I like to trim about 1/8 of an inch away. If you're going to put your quilt into competition, you have to realize they're going to check. The judges are going to check and see. They always say, is your binding filled? Well, now that I have that trimmed away, I'm just going to take that corner, pop that around, and there it is right there on the corner. And from this side, because I like to do my quilting, my binding by machine, I like to fold the folded edge of the binding right over that stitching. And I'm going to tuck it in right here at the corner. And that will be the last step. One more fold. And this just naturally folds under right at that corner and lays great. And then I can go from the right side and then stitch in the ditch from the front side. Well, may you finish all of the quilts for those that you love. Thanks for joining me.